The sound of my father's voice still makes my chest tighten, because that was the voice that told 200 relatives I couldn't manage money. I'm Avery Lawson, 29 years old, and for years I believed I was the family failure. My father made sure everyone knew it. We'd gather for holidays, birthdays, Sunday brunches, and he'd smile that warm smile that looked generous to strangers but felt like glass cutting into me. He'd tell cousins I was irresponsible. He'd tell aunts I depended on him for everything. He'd tell anyone who'd listen that without his support, I'd be lost. And I stayed quiet, swallowing the lies, because I thought silence would eventually prove him wrong. But silence never works when someone controls the story. What my father didn't know, what nobody knew, was that for 3 years I'd been paying the property taxes on the family estate. Every single payment came from my account. Every renovation, every repair, every bill. I had the receipts, the bank statements, the spreadsheets. I had proof he'd been taking credit for work I did in the shadows. And when the accountant called to verify who really paid those taxes, everything changed. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. Big colonial in the suburbs, manicured lawn, expensive cars in the driveway. My mother died when I was 16, leaving me alone with my father's cold disappointment. He remarried quickly, a woman named Diane who smiled politely but never really saw me. My younger brother, Kyle, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I was the one who needed fixing. After high school, I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college because my father said he couldn't afford both of us. Kyle got the state university, the apartment, the allowance. I got leftover money and lectures about responsibility. I graduated with a finance degree, no debt, and a chip on my shoulder the size of the estate I didn't know I'd one day be secretly funding. My first job paid $35,000 a year. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I rented a studio apartment, bought my own furniture, paid my own bills. I thought independence would earn respect. It didn't. My father just found new ways to dismiss me. The insults started small. At family dinners, he'd joke about my tiny apartment, my old car, my clearance rack clothes. Everyone would laugh, not cruel, just enough to make me feel small. He'd compare me to Kyle, who was doing so well in his marketing job that Dad had helped him get. He'd sigh when I spoke, like my opinions were exhausting. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence to ask someone else a question. I learned to stay quiet, to smile, to nod. I learned that fighting back only made things worse, gave him ammunition to call me defensive or emotional. So I built my life in silence, proving myself through work, through savings, through careful planning. 2 years into my job, I got promoted to senior analyst. My salary jumped to $62,000. I felt proud, hopeful. I called my father to share the news. His response? "That's nice, Avery. Just make sure you can actually handle the responsibility." Handle responsibility. The words echoed in my head for days. I'd been handling responsibility since Mom died. I'd managed the household bills when he was too grief-stricken to care. I'd balanced checkbooks, paid utilities, kept us afloat. What nobody knew was that I'd been managing the family estate for 3 years. It started small. My father mentioned property taxes were due, complained about the cost, hinted he might need to sell. I panicked. That house held my last memories of Mom. So I offered to help. Not directly, because he'd refuse. Instead, I quietly paid the first bill myself, $10,000 from my savings. I told myself it was temporary, that he'd pay me back eventually. He never asked about it. The next year, I paid again. Then the year after that. Repairs needed doing, renovations he'd promised Diane. I handled those too, coordinating with contractors, writing checks, keeping meticulous records. I told myself I was protecting Mom's memory, preserving the house she'd loved. But really, I was protecting myself from his disappointment, proving I wasn't the failure he claimed I was. I kept every receipt, every invoice, every bank statement. I created spreadsheets tracking every dollar. I didn't know why I was documenting everything so carefully. Maybe some part of me knew I'd need proof one day. Family gatherings became unbearable. Last Thanksgiving, my father stood up during dinner, glass of wine in hand, and made a toast. He thanked Diane for her support, Kyle for making him proud, and then he turned to me. "And Avery," he said, pausing for effect, "who's still figuring things out." The table laughed. My aunt patted my hand sympathetically. My cousin asked if I was doing okay financially. I smiled, nodded, said I was fine. Inside, I was screaming. I wanted to slam my folder of bank statements on the table, wanted to show them who'd really been funding the estate they all enjoyed. But I didn't. I waited. I don't know what I was waiting for, exactly. Maybe for the right moment. Maybe for someone to ask the right question. Maybe for my father to slip up, to make a claim so obviously false that the truth would have to come out. That moment came sooner than I expected. It came in the form of a phone call from a man I'd never met, asking a question that would unravel 3 years of lies. It was a Thursday morning in March when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello, Ms. Lawson? This is Franklin Stewart, your family's accountant. I'm calling to verify some information regarding the property at 847 Maple Drive." My heart stopped. That was the estate. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice steady. He continued, "Your father mentioned he's been handling all property taxes and maintenance costs personally. I'm reviewing records for his financial statements, and I need to confirm the source of payments from 2020 through 2023. I stayed silent for exactly 3 seconds, letting the weight of what he'd just said sink in. My father had claimed full credit. He'd told the accountant he'd paid everything. And now someone official was questioning it. "Mr. Stewart," I said carefully, "I'd be happy to clarify. What specifically do you need to know?" Over the next 10 minutes, I answered every question with precision. I provided account numbers, transaction dates, exact amounts. I could hear him typing, occasionally pausing to verify details. By the end of the call, his tone had shifted from routine to concerned. "Ms. Lawson," he said slowly, "these records indicate significant payments from your personal account. Were you aware your father claimed these as his own expenses?" "I'm aware now," I replied. There was a long pause. "I see. I'll need to review this further. Would you be able to provide documentation?" "I have everything," I said. "Every receipt, every bank statement, every invoice. 3 years' worth." Another pause. "I'll be in touch." He hung up. I sat in my apartment, phone still pressed to my ear, heart racing. This was it. The moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for. The accountant's verification would either confirm my silent contributions or expose my father's claims as lies. I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. Part of me wanted to call my father, to warn him, to give him a chance to come clean. But a larger part of me, the part that had endured years of dismissal and mockery, wanted to let this play out. I wanted him to squirm. I wanted him to face the truth he'd been denying. So I waited. I gathered my documents, organized my files, and prepared for what came next. The next family gathering was Kyle's birthday party, 2 weeks after the accountant's call. My father arrived confident as always, hugging relatives, accepting compliments on the beautiful estate he'd worked so hard to maintain. I watched him from across the room, sipping water, staying quiet. He didn't know about Mr. Stewart's call. He didn't know I'd spoken to the accountant. He had no idea the foundation of his narrative was cracking. During dinner, he made another toast. To Kyle, who's making smart financial decisions, unlike some people. His eyes flicked to me. Everyone laughed. I smiled, calm, collected. Inside, I was counting down. I knew Mr. Stewart would follow up. I knew the verification process would reveal the truth. I just had to wait. My father seemed slightly distracted that night, checking his phone more than usual, frowning at messages. I wondered if the accountant had already started asking him questions. I wondered if he was starting to panic, realizing his story didn't match the records. The thought filled me with quiet satisfaction. For years, he'd controlled the narrative. Now, the narrative was slipping from his grip. 3 days later, Mr. Stewart called again. Ms. Lawson, I've completed my review. The documentation you provided matches our records exactly. Your father's claims do not. I felt a rush of validation. What happens now? I asked. I'm obligated to report accurate financial information. I'll be speaking with your father about discrepancies in his statements. I thought you should know. Thank you, I said. We hung up. I sat down, hands shaking slightly. This was real. The truth was coming out, not because I'd forced it, but because someone official had asked the right questions and found the receipts to match my answers. I spent that evening preparing for confrontation. I reviewed every document again, rehearsing responses to potential accusations. I knew my father would be angry, defensive, might even try to turn the family against me. But I had facts. Numbers don't lie. Bank statements don't have opinions. Receipts don't care about hurt feelings. I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of his disappointment or his dismissal. I had proof. I had truth. And soon, everyone would know it. The call came on Sunday morning. My father, voice tight with barely controlled anger. Avery, we need to talk. Now. About what? I asked, knowing exactly what. The accountant called. He's saying you paid the property taxes. That's ridiculous. I need you to call him back and clear this up. I stayed silent for a moment, letting the accusation hang. Dad, I did pay the property taxes. For 3 years. I have records. What? Why would you do that without telling me? I did tell you. I offered to help. You said you'd handle it. You never asked how I helped. His voice rose. This is absurd. You're making this up to cause problems. I'm not making anything up. I have bank statements, receipts, invoices. Every single payment is documented. Silence. Then, we're having a family meeting. This afternoon. Be there. He hung up. I stared at my phone, adrenaline flooding my system. This was it. The confrontation I'd been preparing for. I gathered my folder of documents, organized chronologically, highlighted for clarity. I got dressed carefully, choosing clothes that felt professional, confident. I wasn't going to this meeting as the dismissed daughter. I was going as the person who'd been quietly responsible while everyone else believed lies. I arrived at the estate at 3 o'clock. The entire family was there. My father, Diane, Kyle, my Aunt Patricia, my Uncle James, my cousins. Everyone looked confused, tense. My father stood at the head of the dining table, jaw set, eyes hard. Avery has made some claims about property taxes, he began, voice cold. I've asked you all here because I want this settled publicly. I placed my folder on the table. I haven't made claims, Dad. I've stated facts. He ignored me, addressing the room. The accountant called with questions about estate finances. Apparently, Avery told him she's been paying bills. Which is absurd, because I've handled everything for this property since your mother died. I opened the folder, spreading documents across the table. Bank statements, highlighted in yellow. Property tax receipts, dates and amounts circled in red. Contractor invoices, payment confirmations, email threads. These are facts, I said quietly. Every property tax payment since 2020 came from my account. Every repair, every renovation. I have proof. The room went silent. My aunt leaned forward, examining a bank statement. Kyle picked up a receipt, eyes widening. My father's face turned red. This doesn't mean anything. You could have faked these. I didn't fake them, I said, voice steady. Mr. Stewart verified everything with the county records. The payment sources match my account exactly. My father opened his mouth, closed it. I continued, pulling out specific documents. September 2020. Property taxes, $10,000. Paid from my checking account. I slid the statement toward my aunt. March 2021. Roof repair after the storm, $8,500. My account. Another statement. December 2021. Annual property taxes again, $10,200. My account. I kept going, document after document, each one undeniable. My Uncle James leaned back, shaking his head. Tom, is this true? My father's hands clenched. I thought I was handling it. I must have been confused about the source. You weren't confused, I said quietly. You told the accountant you paid everything personally. You told this family I was irresponsible with money. You've been taking credit for my work for 3 years. Diane touched his arm. Tom. He pulled away. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene over nothing. It's not nothing, I said. It's $38,000. It's 3 years of me funding this estate while you told everyone I couldn't manage money. The room erupted in whispers. My cousin Ashley looked at me with something like awe. You paid all that? I nodded. Kyle stared at the documents, face pale. Why didn't you say anything? I did. Dad said he'd handle it. I assumed he meant he'd reimburse me or at least acknowledge it. He did neither. My father stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. In my own house. It's not your house, I interrupted, surprised by my own calm. Not entirely. Not when I've been paying to maintain it. My aunt spoke up. Tom, these documents are clear. Why did you tell people you paid everything? He fumbled for words. I intended to pay. I was going to handle it. Things got complicated. For 3 years. Uncle. James asked. Things were complicated for 3 straight years. My father's composure cracked. Fine. She helped. Is everyone happy now? I didn't help, I said. I did it. Alone. While you took credit. The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable. Family members exchanged glances, some apologetic, some shocked. I felt a strange lightness, like years of weight lifting off my shoulders. The truth was out. Witnessed. Undeniable. My father couldn't spin this away. I think we should give Tom and Avery some privacy, Diane said quietly, but I shook my head. No. This needed to be public because the lies were public. Everyone here heard him call me irresponsible. Everyone here watched him take credit for maintaining this estate. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. My Aunt Patricia nodded slowly. She's right. My father looked around the room, seeing his narrative collapse in real time. He tried once more. I was protecting you, Avery. I didn't want people knowing you were struggling. I wasn't struggling. I was managing. There's a difference. Kyle spoke up, voice small. I didn't know, Avery. I'm sorry. I looked at my brother, saw genuine regret. I know you didn't. That's the point. Nobody knew because Dad made sure you believed his version. The room stayed quiet, absorbing the revelation. I gathered my documents, organizing them back into the folder. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm not asking for repayment. I'm just asking for honesty. No more lies about who I am or what I can't do. My father sat down heavily, defeated. For the first time in my life, I saw him look small, vulnerable, caught. After the meeting, several relatives approached me privately. My aunt hugged me, whispering, I'm sorry we believed him. My cousin asked for financial advice, suddenly seeing me as competent. Kyle offered to help with anything I needed, guilt written across his face. I accepted their apologies gracefully, but I didn't need them. This wasn't about making people feel bad. It was about reclaiming truth. That night, alone in my apartment, I felt something unfamiliar: peace. Not happiness exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of finally being seen accurately. My father called once, voice subdued. "We should talk." "We just did," I replied. "In front of everyone." That's all the talking I needed. "Avery, please. I made mistakes." "You made choices, Dad. Choices to diminish me, to take credit for my work, to lie to our family." Silence. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't erase 3 years of humiliation." I hung up, feeling no anger, just clarity. The apology didn't heal anything, but the truth did. The truth had given me back my story, my worth, my respect. And that was worth more than any words he could offer now. In the weeks that followed, things shifted. My father no longer made jokes at my expense. Family gatherings became quieter, more respectful. Kyle started asking me questions about finances, budgeting, investments. He looked up to me now in ways he never had before. Diane apologized privately, admitting she'd never questioned my father's narrative. "I should have asked you directly," she said. I appreciated the honesty. Mr. Stewart called to confirm he'd corrected the financial records. "Your father's statements have been amended to reflect accurate information. I apologize for any confusion this caused." "It wasn't your fault," I assured him. "You asked the right questions." The accountant's call had been the catalyst, but the real power had been in my preparation. Years of documentation, careful record-keeping, and quiet diligence had created an undeniable case. I'd learned something important: truth needs evidence. Feelings, accusations, arguments, those can be dismissed. But receipts, bank statements, official records, those can't be ignored. I'd built a case so solid that even my father's charm and manipulation couldn't shake it. And in doing so, I'd reclaimed not just respect, but my own sense of worth. Friends who heard the story reached out, impressed by my patience and strategy. Some shared similar experiences of family members taking credit or dismissing their achievements. I listened, offered advice, and realized my story wasn't unique. Many people face relatives who underestimate them, who manipulate narratives, who claim credit for others' work. What made the difference was documentation and timing. I'd waited for the right moment, prepared thoroughly, and presented facts calmly. No screaming, no drama, just truth delivered with precision. One friend asked, "Weren't you tempted to confront him earlier?" "Every day," I admitted. But I knew emotion would undermine me. I needed someone else to ask the questions, someone official. The accountant gave me that. "That's brilliant," she said. I smiled. It wasn't planned. I just got lucky that he called. But maybe it wasn't entirely luck. Maybe 3 years of careful record-keeping had been unconscious preparation for a moment I knew would eventually come. Maybe I'd been building my case all along, waiting for the universe to provide the opening. Either way, I'd been ready. My relationship with my father remained strained but civil. He no longer dismissed me publicly, but genuine connection felt impossible. I'd realized something during the confrontation. I didn't need his approval. For years, I'd sought validation from someone incapable of giving it. I tried to prove my worth to a man who decided long ago I wasn't worth his respect. The revelation hadn't changed him fundamentally. It had just forced him to acknowledge reality. But it had changed me. I no longer measured my value by his opinion. I measured it by my own standards, my own achievements, my own integrity. I'd handled responsibilities he'd failed to even acknowledge. I'd maintained a property he'd almost lost through neglect. I'd been the adult in situations where he'd been the child. And I'd done it all without recognition, without thanks, without even basic acknowledgement. But I didn't need those things from him anymore. I had proof of my competence. I had family members who now saw me clearly. I had self-respect that couldn't be shaken by his dismissals. That was enough. More than enough. I started setting boundaries. When my father called with requests, I evaluated them carefully. Some I agreed to, others I declined. When he asked me to handle estate maintenance again, I said no. You can hire someone, I told him. I'm not doing it for free while you take credit. He sputtered. I wasn't taking credit. Yes, you were. For 3 years. I'm done with that arrangement. Silence. Then, grudgingly, fine. The boundary felt powerful. I wasn't cutting him off entirely, but I was defining what I would and wouldn't accept. No more silent contributions. No more invisible labor. No more letting him claim my work as his own. Kyle noticed the change. You're different now, he observed. How so? Stronger. More sure of yourself. I smiled. I'm the same person. I just stopped hiding it. He nodded thoughtfully. I want to be more like that. You can be, I said. Just be honest about what you do and what you don't do. Don't let anyone, including Dad, define you. It felt good to guide my brother, to help him see patterns I'd learned through pain. Months passed. The family adjusted to the new dynamic. My father attended gatherings but spoke less, observed more. Sometimes I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret? Respect? Maybe both. I didn't ask. I focused on building my own life, independent of his opinion. I got another promotion at work, became a director, started earning 6 figures. I bought my own condo, decorated it exactly how I wanted, invited family over for dinners where I controlled the conversation and the atmosphere. My aunt commented on how confident I seemed. You've really come into your own, she said. I thought about that phrase. Come into my own. As if I'd been someone else before. But I'd always been this person. I'd just been hidden, dismissed, overlooked. The revelation hadn't changed who I was. It had just forced others to see me accurately. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not changing myself, but making my reality visible. Not becoming someone new, but claiming space as who I'd always been. One evening, my father showed up at my condo unannounced. I almost didn't let him in, but curiosity won. What do you need? I asked, not inviting him to sit. He looked around, taking in my space, my life, the evidence of my independence. I wanted to talk. Properly. I waited. He continued, I've been thinking about what happened. About how I treated you. And I was wrong. I see that now. I let pride and habit blind me. I didn't acknowledge what you did because acknowledging it meant admitting I hadn't done it. I stayed quiet, letting him finish. I know sorry isn't enough. I know I hurt you for years. I needed you to know I understand that now. I considered his words. They felt genuine, tinged with real regret. But they didn't erase the past. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally. But understanding isn't the same as change. I know. I'm trying to change. We'll see, I said, not unkindly. He nodded, accepting the boundary. Fair enough. He left shortly after, and I sat in my living room, processing the conversation. The apology felt like closure, even if incomplete. My father was trying, however imperfectly. That was more than I'd expected. I thought about forgiveness, about whether I owed it to him or to myself. I decided forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about releasing the anger that had fueled me for years. I could forgive him for being flawed while still maintaining boundaries. I could acknowledge his regret while not forgetting his actions. Forgiveness didn't mean returning to how things were. It meant accepting what happened and choosing how to move forward. I chose to move forward with clarity. I'd see my father at family events, maintain civil relationship, even offer occasional help. But I wouldn't sacrifice my peace for his comfort. I wouldn't silence my truth to protect his ego. I wouldn't make myself small so he could feel big. Those days were over. I'd reclaimed my story, and I wasn't giving it back. Not for apologies, not for promises, not for anything. My worth wasn't negotiable anymore. It was a fact, documented and verified, undeniable to anyone paying attention, including me. I started sharing my experience with others who felt dismissed by family. I wrote about it online, anonymously at first, then under my own name. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out, sharing similar stories of being underestimated, having work claimed by relatives, being called irresponsible while actually being the most responsible person in the room. I realized how common this pattern was. How many families had invisible members doing crucial work while others took credit. How many people stayed silent, hoping eventually their efforts would be recognized. How many never got their accountant's call, their moment of verification, their public vindication. I offered advice: document everything, save receipts, maintain records, wait for the right moment. I emphasized staying calm, presenting facts, avoiding emotional arguments. I shared what had worked for me, knowing it might not work for everyone but hoping it would help someone. The conversations were healing, both for me and for others. We formed a community of people who'd been underestimated and had fought back with truth, preparation, and quiet strength. Looking back, I see the whole journey differently now. The pain wasn't wasted. It taught me resilience, patience, strategic thinking. It forced me to become meticulous, organized, self-reliant. It showed me the power of documentation, of facts over feelings, of preparation over impulse. I'd entered that family meeting with a folder of papers and left with my dignity intact. Not because I'd shouted louder or fought harder, but because I'd built a case so thorough that denial became impossible. That's the lesson I carry forward. Truth requires evidence, and evidence requires work. Consistent, unglamorous, detail-oriented work. The kind of work nobody sees until the moment it matters most. My father's accountant had asked a simple question, and I'd had 3 years of answers ready. That preparation made all the difference. It turned a potential he said she said argument into a clear, undeniable revelation. It transformed my word against his into facts verified by external sources. That's power. Not loud, not dramatic, but absolutely unshakable. The kind of power that comes from knowing you've done the work, kept the records, and told the truth. Today, I live confidently. My father and I have a cautious, respectful relationship. He no longer dismisses me, no longer takes credit for my work, no longer tells lies about my capabilities. The family sees me clearly now, not as a struggling daughter but as the competent woman who'd been there all along. I'm proud of how I handled everything. Proud of my patience, my preparation, my calm delivery of truth. Proud that I didn't let anger make me cruel or pain make me silent. I stood up for myself with facts, not fury, and that made all the difference. The accountant's call was the catalyst, but I was the one who'd built the case. I was the one who'd saved every receipt, maintained every record, documented every payment. I'd been preparing for vindication without even knowing it. And when the moment came, I was ready. My story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming truth, asserting worth, and refusing to be erased. It's about the quiet power of diligence, the strength of documentation, and the victory that comes when facts finally speak louder than lies. This is my story, fully mine, and I tell it with pride, clarity, and absolute certainty.